you have what it takes, particularly as an LGBTQ people, because you have the perseverance and the bravery and the grit that's necessary to run for office and to win.
Love that. Oh, maybe I'm going to run.
Yes, run! I love it.
This is a historic moment, not only for Logo Live, but for America, honey. Senator Sarah McBride made history this year as the first transgender person to be elected to state senate. When she is sworn into office in Delaware in January, she will become the highest ranking transgender official in United States history. So Logo Live fam, let's give it up for Senator Sarah McBride. Woo, woo, woo. Hi, thank you so much for joining us today on Logo Live. I'm not worthy. I'm so happy to have you. When we first thought of this show, you were one of the top names that we really wanted to get on. So thank you for taking time to join us today.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so honored and excited to be on with you.
So I just wanted to first off start off by saying congratulations. This is history right now. You're the first trans person to ever be elected to such a high-ranking office. I just need to know, because I'm so curious, that moment. Give me a Sophia Petrillo, take me back. What did that feel like when you heard the news?
It was almost perfect. I had spent the entire election day visiting different polling locations around my district. The final polling location that I visited as polls were closing was my old middle school and high school, which was the perfect spot to sort of end that journey, or at least end that chapter in that journey where it all started for me. And then after the polls closed, I got in the car on my way to what we hoped would be a victory party. And I kept refreshing the Department of Elections results page on my phone over and over and over again. And about 15 minutes after polls closed, the first results popped up, the results from the absentee vote, which was a huge portion, of course. And the results came in and showed us winning with such a margin that it was certain that we would win the election. And almost instantly, I got a call from Danica Rome, the nation's first out transgender person elected to and later to serve in a legislature, a person who I and so many other trans candidates stand on the shoulders of. And so she was calling, clearly refreshing the page like me. And she was the first person to call and say congratulations, which was just a fitting message to receive from such an incredible person.
That's amazing. I remember hearing it as well, and it was such an anxious time that when we heard the news, it was like, oh, a win for all of us. It was so great. So I'm so happy. It's such a great moment. Your win and the work that you do has been super awe-inspiring for a lot of people, not only in our community but around the country. What can you say to folks that feel that getting a position like yours or winning a senatorship feels like it could be so out of reach? What could you say to someone that's younger maybe, or not even, that could give them hope to say, you got it and you can do it too?
My hope was that the results in this election help send a small but life-saving message to a young person, particularly an LGBTQ young person who is struggling with their place in this world, that our democracy is big enough for them too, and that their voice matters. I know how much of a difference it would have made for me as a young person to see the news of trans people getting elected to public office. I know it would have made a huge difference in my own journey. The idea that someone like me could win when I was a kid seemed so impossible that it was almost incomprehensible. Over the last 10 years, advocating for equality here in Delaware and nationally, including my work at the Human Rights Campaign, I am in this moment more hopeful than I've ever been that change is possible and that we have in our hands the capacity to transform change that once seemed so impossible that it was almost incomprehensible, not only into possibility, but into reality today. 7 years ago, I stood on the floor of the Delaware State Senate with tears in my eyes and my parents by my side to plead for my rights and the rights for thousands of transgender Delawareans so that we could be protected from discrimination in employment, housing, and public spaces. Standing on that floor, looking out at that chamber, seeing no one like me, seeing a group of people that is as well-intentioned and as compassionate as they were, who a majority ended up voting for our bill, had a difficult time wrapping their minds around what it means to be trans and what it's like to be trans. To now have the opportunity 7 years later to stand on that same floor as my authentic self, fighting for dignity and opportunity for every single Delawarean, it demonstrates how far we've come. And it's not the end of the road. It doesn't solve every issue, but that greater diversity in government and that fact that we have transformed in so many ways, particularly as an LGBTQ community, what once seemed impossible just generations, even just years ago, into reality today demonstrates how far we've come, demonstrates that the only limitation on our dreams is the limitation of our own imagination, that nothing is truly impossible unless you give up. The one other thing I want to say is I think a lot of times people can look at people who get elected to public office or who make it in business or the arts, whatever the field may be, and think those folks did it because they were fearless. And to look at that success or that advancement or that victory and say, you know what, but I have this voice in the back of my head that is questioning whether I can do it, that's telling me that I can't do it, that tells me that I'm not up to it. I have these fears, I have these insecurities, I have these anxieties. That must mean that I don't have the potential. And for all of us who have run for office and won, for anyone who's pursued greater opportunity in whatever field they're in, we do it in spite of having those fears, in spite of having those anxieties, in spite of having those insecurities, not because they didn't exist. And so we aren't fearless because we have those fears. And to never doubt that because you have that voice in the back of your head that you might not be able to do it. It doesn't mean that.
We talk a lot about representation because it's super important and always has been, and sometimes when they're not offering you a seat at the table, you have to build your own tables. Your story with Governor Jack Markle and that sort of mentorship with a cis heterosexual person, what has that taught you about what being a good ally is, or what has it shown you?
With folks like Governor Markell and former Attorney General Bill Biden, these are individuals with incredible privilege, both white, straight, cisgender men who utilized the power of their offices to not just create more space for me as an individual and as a friend of theirs to have a seat at the table, to serve, to run, but help utilize the power of their office to effectuate change for the entirety of our community. They put their political capital on the line to pass the gender identity non-discrimination bill. They served as role models. They created a standard that our communities had to live up to when other trans people came out. And that is what allyship is. It's not, passive acceptance. It's not just being a friend. It's putting something on the line. For many people, that's just merely the comfort of their surroundings, right? It might just be making a situation awkward because you feel compelled to say, hey, that joke or that comment that dehumanizes an LGBTQ person, you might not have meant it with ill intent, but that's not right. It might be that. It might be something that simple.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, in politics, so often they say, you can't do this, you can't do that in order to get elected. And what I feel like we're seeing more and more is that you can do this and you can be that and you can live so much more authentically. And that really does speak to the voter a lot further than, if you were just making all these concessions in order to get elected,
And that is what you just said is the key word, is that people want authenticity. And so that's actually one of the reasons why I think LGBTQ people are such effective candidates and elected officials, because we have demonstrated the recognition that there are some things that are just more important than, being able to get that promotion or being able to run for office, right? We risked it all in coming out. That identity that might have been a source of shame for so long, that's actually our superpower.
Amen. Ooh. I have goosebumps. The next question I wanted to ask you about the trans military ban, obviously super hurtful for so many people, especially those veterans that have put their lives on the line and signed up to serve our country. We're looking to reverse that, obviously, and get rid of it. What would you say would be the next issue on the docket that we really, really need to pay attention to in regards to the trans community?
Well, I think there are really two issues that are front and center for our community as the Biden-Harris administration takes office. One is the ongoing and deepening epidemic of violence that's targeting the trans community, particularly Black transgender women. And this issue, perhaps more than any other issue, demonstrates the need for intersectional solutions to the challenges we face, because we know that that crisis of violence is a byproduct of the toxic combination of racism, sexism, transphobia, and homophobia. And we can't address that violence unless we address all of those prejudices and all of the ways that those prejudices are institutionalized and formalized within our society and the structures of our society. So often trans people who are facing violence face that violence because society has pushed them out of stable employment, pushed them out of stable housing, pushed them onto the streets, into underground economies, and out of society's traditional mechanisms for safety and security. And so we need to address that epidemic of violence. That means expanding access to economic opportunity for the trans community. It doesn't just mean non-discrimination protections. It means putting our money where our mouth is, putting funding into programs that foster professional development and job opportunities for the trans community. It means reforming our criminal justice system and policing systems so that it truly protects the dignity and safety of every person, including trans people. It means making sure that housing is affordable so that people aren't pushed onto the streets. It means electing leaders who don't demonize and stigmatize transgender people, that don't diminish the dignity and worth of trans people's lives, that allows for a perpetrator of violence to escalate their violence into a fatal attack. Because when politicians are targeting and mocking and ridiculing and discriminating against transgender people, it sends a dangerous message to society that the lives of trans people are less worthy, and it lowers the bar at which a perpetrator of violence will engage in fatal violence. The next part of this movement, too, through the halls of Congress, is passing the Equality Act, making sure that LGBTQ people are explicitly and clearly protected from discrimination throughout daily life. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have made the Equality Act a central pillar of their agenda, not just for LGBTQ people, but a central pillar of their agenda for America. And I think that passing that legislation will be the next greatest step in our journey toward justice and equality for our community. And I believe we have two leaders who are going to fight for passage of that legislation through the next Congress.
We've heard a lot about one of our legends right now, Stacey Abrams, loving Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So what is a show or something that you really geek out on that just like you could talk about for hours?
Okay, so like my good television right now that I'm actually watching it already for a second time is The Crown. But so, I mean, like it's amazing, but that's not like a fun answer. That's like a you know,
Can I just say that when you were about to join the call, I was joking with Mike, our producer, that I was going to answer the call saying, "Your Majesty." So I'm just so happy that now, like me saying it, you understand where that comes from.
Oh my God. And this season I thought was great. Gillian Anderson was phenomenal as Margaret Thatcher. And I'm excited for the next season.
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator. I honestly, we are not worthy, and we're so happy to have you, not only as part of the family, but as part of our political system that is changing for the better. Thank you so much for joining us. We love you.
Love you. Thank you.